Coming up next, Sitting at 30 takes you downtown for the weekly luncheon meeting of the City Club of Portland. Live weekly coverage of City Club is made possible in part by TCI and is produced through the facilities of Portland Cable Access. Now we join the City Club for this week's program.
I'm a member of the Board of Governors of City Club. I'm standing in today for Pete Heuser, President of the City Club, who's on vacation this week. Welcome to another outstanding program. Today we celebrate the 50th birthday of one of Portland's many fine gems, Forest Park. We're happy today to have the Friends of Forest Park co-sponsoring this program, and I see we also brought the ivy removal crew. Our guest speakers today are Charles Jordan, Director of Parks and Recreation for the City of Portland, Mike Houck, Urban Naturalist for the Audubon Society of Portland, and Marcy Houle, Wildlife Biologist and author. Before that, I have a few pieces of business to attend to. We have a new member with us today, Stephanie Swanson, Account Supervisor with the Cole Weber firm. Stephanie, are you in the room? Thank you. Welcome. Next Friday, August 7th, join us for a special program with the president of the Oregon Community Foundation, Greg Chalet. Greg will talk about philanthropy in Oregon, particularly as it relates to the arts. Next Friday's program will be the last Friday program before the club takes a small hiatus in August. City Club programs will resume here at the Mac Club again on September 8th, and we have a crowded agenda for the fall with ballot measure votes and political debates. So please come back to join us in September. We have a special opportunity on August 25th. There's a special sneak preview ride on the new West Side Light Rail in the evening. The ride will go out to Hillsborough, where we will have dinner and talk with Tom Walsh, Director of TriMet. There's a reservation form in your bulletin this week, and I understand that the people are signing up very quickly, and there's only so much room on the light rail trains, so if you'd like to go, please sign up quickly. Our board host today is Sharon Brabenak, member of the Board of Governors and our membership task force chair. She will ask the first question of the speakers. Before Sharon is even finished, those who wish to ask questions of our speakers should line up at the microphone over there so that we can begin asking questions without delay. We limit city questions to City Club members and Friends of Forest Park members today, so please identify yourself as a member and ask your question. Please limit your question to 30 seconds. Broadcast of City Club programs this quarter is made possible in part because of corporate underwriting from Miller, Nash, Weiner, Hager, and Carlson law firm, U.S. Bank, and Legacy Health System, and we're grateful for their support. Thank you. And now to today's program. Just about a mile from here, as Mike Houck said, as the heron flies, begins Forest Park, one of the world's largest city parks and a vital natural corridor linking Portland to the Coast Range. This year marks the 50th anniversary of the creation of Forest Park, and we City Club members can be proud of the role that the club played in writing a 1945 report proposing the creation of the park. Just a few years before, there had been oil drilling explorations in the park area, so that's something to think about and what the park might have looked like. But we can also be especially proud of the members and fellow Portland citizens who followed up on that report to the creation of the park. Today, Forest Park shines brightly as the crown jewel of Portland's park system, yet protection of its natural integrity remains a challenge as urban development continues to tighten around the park. Our speakers today are highly qualified to review for us the value of Forest Park and the questions for its future. Marcy Houle is the author of One City's Wilderness, Portland's Forest Park. Her guide reveals the diversity of plants, birds, and animals in Forest Park. Ms. Houle continues to work on writing projects while raising sheep, organic vegetables, and children on her Sauvie Island farm. Love having the resumes available. Mike Houck is well known to many of us and has been a central leader in recognizing the value of green spaces and urban waterways in the fabric they form for Portland. He played a key role in the green spaces plan that Metro adopted, and then going out and helping pass the bond measure that funded the green spaces program. Charles Jordan is a nationally recognized leader for public parks and open spaces. He serves on the board of directors of the Conservation Fund and has a presidential appointment to the American Heritage Rivers Advisory Committee. And of course, he served for 10 years as a Portland City Commissioner, where he was Commissioner of Parks for 3 years. So without delay, I'll turn it over to our first speaker, Marcy Houle. Thank you.
Well, I'm happy to be here today. And actually, of course, we are commemorating the 50-year history of Forest Park. But what really is interesting, in reality, the history isn't 50 years old. It's exactly 100 years old. And I'll explain that. Because the vision to create what today is Forest Park actually spun into motion in 1898 when a Reverend Thomas Eliot, he was a Unitarian pastor educated at Harvard, he set up the first park system of Portland. He'd come to Portland in 1867, and he loved his adopted city. But over 30 years, he became increasingly distressed at what he saw happening to the city because he idealized Portland, and he saw it, as he called it, a moral, a humane, and an enlightened place to live. And so he became disturbed because he saw what was happening to the government. He felt it was a government by accident, not by planning, and a struggling crossroads of humanity is what he called it. So he started moralizing a lot, and he got the nickname the Conscience of Portland. Unfortunately, his moralizing didn't do any good at all, but he wasn't one to give up. And so what he did, he became an advocate for parks. And so he, with his insistence, he formed in 1899 the Municipal Park Commission of Portland. And he was appointed to its first board of commissioners. And then probably his most important act of his whole tenure with the parks was he contracted the most highly respected landscape architecture firm of its day, the Olmsted Brothers of Central Park fame, to come to Portland and do a planning study for parks for Portland. And so the Olmsted Brothers came out and they completed their research in 1903. And the report made some far-reaching suggestions that you can see evidence of today. One was they came up with the idea of the 40-mile loop, which was the idea of connecting all the parks around the periphery of Portland. And the other main suggestion they had in 1903 was to preserve what they said the hills west of the Willamette River should be a park of wild woodland character. So in 1907, the Olmsted plan was put to a bond issue, and $1 million bond issue was passed, but unfortunately all the money went to developing existing parks and not to buy any new parks. And this was just the first of what was to be many setbacks for Forest Park. And then in 1912, an eminent city planner from Chicago, E.H. Bennett, came to do what was called the Greater Portland Plan. And Bennett was well-traveled in the United States and throughout Europe, and so he was well aware of the great forest reserves among major cities in Europe. And he was very impressed with the landscape of Portland, and after studying, he too strongly suggested that the wild woodland should be preserved as a park in Portland. And what he quoted, he said, "The great woodland areas are the life-giving elements of a city." And so the following year, Portland tried passing a $2 million park bond issue, which would have helped to acquire Forest Park. And it was really promoted by the park superintendent of that day, Emmanuel Mishi. And anyway, unfortunately, it went down. It didn't pass. And Emmanuel Mishi was so disheartened, he resigned. And then things changed in Forest Park. The idea of the park kind of fell aside, and in 1915, the city set up a wood logging camp for the unemployed in the hills. And at the same time, developers got really excited, expecting a great land boom. So they set up thousands of lots for vacant lots to all have homes. And in the meantime, another realtor named set up an idea of having a road go all the way through the park at 600 feet elevation, which today is Leif Erikson Drive, where everyone bicycles. Anyway, he made this road, and it cost twice as much as expected. It cost $150,000, and it washed out the first winter. And so all the people who had these lots were assessed for the cost. Well, you can imagine what happened. Over the next 15 years, no one paid for the assessment, and so all the lots were forfeited to the city for non-payment of assessment. And at the same time, after all the other part of the park that was logged over and burned by out-of-control slash fires, that fell to Multnomah County for delinquent taxes. So things looked pretty grim for a while. But the dream is still held by a number of citizens. It was never totally let go. And the standing of this dream became greater in 1943 when Robert Moses, who was a national renowned city planner, came to Portland to make what was called the Portland Improvement Report. And he was so impressed with what was to be Forest Park. And he wrote, "The wooded hillsides west of the city are as important to Portland as the Palisades of the Hudson are to the city of New York." Well, it was obvious something had to be done, and it had to be done now if it ever were to be done. And this is where you can be proud, because this is where the City Club comes into play. And if it hadn't been for the City Club, we may never have had a forest park. Maybe some of you remember Garnet Ding Cannon. He was an active Portland businessman, very active in the City Club, and a great outdoorsman. Well, he loved Forest Park, or the idea, and so in 1945, he asked the City Club to conduct a study on the park's feasibility. Well, the findings were unanimous that the desirability of creating a 6,000-acre park would be a tremendous benefit to our community, and for the recreation and for the beautification of Portland, and as a sanctuary for wildlife. Under its bylaws, City Club could not implement its own recommendations, and so they took the next step. Ding Cannon took the request and called a public meeting in 1947 of citizens to formulate a plan of action. And so an advocacy group was formed called the Forest Park Committee of 50, which at that time were 50 groups, civic, commercial, educational, and recreational agencies got together. And they petitioned the City Council to dedicate all the public lands in the area, plus an idea to acquire in-holdings within the 6,000-acre boundary to make a park. And the City Council adopted the resolution unanimously. And then, less than a year later, Multnomah County transferred all of its tax delinquent properties to the City Park Bureau without any cost. And the City of Portland gave all that's from the Department of Assessment, all that land, to the Park Bureau too. So in 1948, 50 years ago, this September 25th, Forest Park was officially dedicated at 4,200 acres. And now, today, it's over 5,000 acres. We've been still acquiring bit by bit the in-holdings, and it really has proved out everything that the City Club report said about in terms for its benefits for the beauty of our city, for recreation, and for wildlife. And I guess that was proved, really came home for me, because in 1982, the Oregon Parks Foundation, of which Ding Cannon, again, was a charter member, funded a study to look at all the wildlife of Forest Park, and I was the lucky biologist that got the job. So what I found, I always had loved the park, but it was so impressive. I found over 112 species of native birds and over 62 species of mammals lived in Forest Park. And this was, as a biologist, it was just outstanding, because most city parks around the country, you just have a steady decline of wildlife. You get, starlings and pigeons and all those things. But you don't have native wildlife. And what I found from researching what Lewis and Clark saw was we have a very similar assemblage of wildlife than what William Clark had in his notes in 1806. So anyway, this is a function of several things: of the size of Forest Park, of the idea that it's a one big unfragmented park for the most part, and its connection, as Doug said, to the Coast Range, which acts like a rural reservoir, filtering plants and animals they can move back and forth at this time. So anyway, when I think back again of what people have done over the last 100 years, and I think of their wisdom and their altruism and their vision, I am just so impressed, and it makes me want to work harder for things that'll, maybe be important 100 years from now. And I'm going to end with a quote I've always loved. I put it in my book as my preface, because it's what the Olmsted said in 1903 about Forest Park. And to me, this is the essence of Forest Park and of the vision Portland had for the city. Along the hills northwest of Portland, there are a succession of ravines and spurs covered with remarkably beautiful primeval woods. It is true that some people look upon such woods merely as a troublesome encumbrance standing in the way of a more profitable use of the land. But future generations will not feel so, and will bless the men who were wise enough to get such woods preserved. Future generations will be likely to appreciate the wild beauty and the grandeur of the tall fir trees in this forest park, its deep, shady ravines and bold view-commanding spurs, far more than do the majority of the citizens today, many of whom are familiar with similar original woods. But such primeval woods will become as rare about Portland as they are now about Boston. If these woods are preserved, they will surely come to be regarded as marvelously beautiful. Thank you.
Charles is already starting this timer. I was given very explicit instructions not to exceed my time limit today. I actually did write a 10-page report that I'm going to share with anybody who cares to read the whole thing, but I'll distill it down into 10 minutes, 10 to 12 minutes. Marcy just read a quote from what for me is the Bible of parks and green spaces planning in this region, and a lot of people are not aware of this document. It is the report that Olmsted's gave to the Portland Park Board in 1903. The Portland Park Bureau has copies of this available for $5. And anyone who's interested in park issues, I really would urge you to read it. It is an incredibly eloquent description of a comprehensive interconnected regional system. I'd like to start out by commenting, it's a pleasure to share the podium today, both with Marcy and with Charles. I met Charles first in the early 70s, and I remember it very vividly. I was testifying before Portland City Council on behalf of the Audubon Society of Portland, and there were a lot of other folks involved trying to protect a heronry on Ross Island. And I remember mid-testimony, Charles stopped me and said, Mr. Houck, are those the large birds that come into my backyard and eat my goldfish? I'm very pleased to say that Charles did vote to protect those herons, and furthermore, we've had a very wonderful collaborative relationship over the past several years in protection of green spaces. And it was mentioned at the outset that he also serves at the national level in capacities such as President Clinton's American Heritage Rivers Advisory Council. And I don't think it's any small coincidence that the Willamette, which was the only river in the West, was nominated and accepted by President Clinton. And I think we owe Charles a debt of gratitude for his leadership at the national level as well. Today's program is titled Forest Park at 50, Is Its Future Safe? Well, as usual, I kind of prefer to twist that around a little bit and answer my own question, which I would say, not only is it safe, but is it enough? We are well on our way to creating one element of a regionally interconnected park system through a combination of Metro's Green Spaces Acquisition Program and the local share of the 1995 $135.6 million bond measure, which was passed, thankfully with the endorsement of the City Club of Portland. Today, we can also celebrate the fact that Forest Park and Olmsted's 1903 vision was, in my opinion, the catalyst for a region-wide comprehensive parks and green spaces system. Metro has done exactly what it promised the voters it would do. Are you listening, Bill Sizemore? There are now over 3,600 acres of green spaces which have been added to the land base in this region today, not counting the local share. Metro has provided at each table a packet of information which outlines those acquisition sites, gives a full description of the land that's been acquired, and a one-page summary of all of the inholdings which have been acquired in Forest Park, which I think Charles is going to refer to later. There are also three large-scale maps I'd like to draw your attention to. First on the right is a large-scale version of all the acquisitions, and to my left, to your right, on the far right, is what I think is an incredibly important element of the Green Spaces Initiative, which frequently gets lost in the discussions of green space acquisitions, and that's the regional trail system. Both trails that exist currently and ones that are going to be put in place in the future. And I think anybody here who's walked Wildwood Trail or sauntered up Leif Erikson knows that Forest Park without those access points would not be the resource that it is to this metropolitan region. And I see Ray Polani is here today. I would suggest that that is, in my opinion, one of the most important elements, an alternative transit option for folks to be able to walk from green space to green space, which in fact the Olmsteds envisioned driving. 40-Mile Loop Land Trust took that concept and applied it in creating the 40-mile loop. Let's see. There's a third map that I want to especially draw your attention to. We've had many discussions in this region about whether it would be possible to actually put in place another forest park today. I think Forest Park, in many respects, as Marcy pointed out, was a happy, serendipitous event, which fortunately the City Club and others were willing to take an opportunity and run to daylight and make it happen. In East County, East Portland and the Gresham area, between the Clackamas River and the East Lava Buttes in Gresham, I think there is a tremendous opportunity by looking at water resource issues, parks and green space issues, floodplain management, that we could assemble, not in one contiguous plot, but essentially the same landmass over that we would call Forest Park East, I guess. I know Nancy Chase, I see, is over here. She and her staff at Metro Parks and Green Spaces and other folks out in the Gresham area have been thinking along these lines, and we've got a map here which depicts that as a possible future Forest Park East. And I would suggest that City Club might want to take that on as a possible future effort for its next 50-year celebration of a 5,000-acre chunk of land. I'd like to address some of the concerns we've got regarding future forest parks or lands that we might try to assemble that would equal Forest Park in its significance. We will never have enough acquisition funds to create a regional system of parks and green spaces that we envision in this region. We will also need to rely on both regulatory and non-regulatory approaches. When I started conducting fish and wildlife habitat inventories, coincidentally in 1982, the same year Marcy was looking at Forest Park, I was told by a leading planner in the Portland metropolitan region in one of our counties that parks, green spaces, wildlife habitat, wetlands, and so forth are not to be protected inside the urban growth boundary. That in fact it was antithetical to the whole planning concept. The whole point of the urban growth boundary was to protect farm and forest land outside and to maximize development inside the UGB. I've also seen recently a poster touting smart growth, which I support. Audubon Society of Portland, Coalition for a Livable Future are all working to integrate compact urban design, hold the urban growth boundary to protect resources outside the UGB. But we also recognize that we need to protect green spaces, what we would refer to as the urban green infrastructure. Patty Tillett, I know, has spoken to this group in the past and refers to as the green infrastructure as part of that overall strategy for regional growth management. The first tentative steps have been taken at the regional level to move toward this goal. Metro Council adopted recently Title III of the Urban Growth Management Functional Plan, and what that says is that in all 24 cities and 3 counties there needs to be better floodplain management and protection of vegetated corridors along our streams to protect the regions of water quality. I'm sad to say that there are some in the development community who have already taken that to LUBA to appeal Title III. I suspect that we'll prevail on that at the regional level. And in addition to Title III, there are many elements of the regional framework plan regarding fish and wildlife habitat, stormwater management, which I do not have time to go into, that are the next steps in that direction of securing what we like to call the urban green infrastructure. Do we have, this is a question that comes up frequently with respect to Forest Park and other open spaces, do we have the resources to manage Forest Park, and should we defer future acquisitions until we have our management programs well in hand? The answer from my perspective is a loud no. Do we have the resources first? While the East Bay Regional Park District and Mid-Peninsula Parks in San Francisco Bay Area spend $613 and $574 per acre on management of their natural areas respectively, in Boulder, Colorado, $556 per acre, the City of Portland currently has $129 per acre dedicated to management of its natural areas. Forest Park, I believe, has something more on the order of $25 to $50 and 1.5 FTEs personnel to manage Forest Park, 0.5 of which I think is sitting right over here at Fred Nielsen. And I think we really need to recognize Fred, Jim Shalin, and others who are doing a yeoman's work out there with very few resources, and we need to address that issue. The solution, however, is neither to take money from other programs within the Portland Park Bureau. And I can tell you, I've sat on the Budget Advisory Committee for a number of years, and every year it was how much more could we cut out of various programs. The solution is increasing the pie rather than trying to divide the pie up more thinly. The second response, a lot of folks have indicated, even during the first bond measure attempt, that we should not buy any green spaces until somehow we decide how we're going to manage them. Once we get that in hand, we get the money, then we can go out and buy more green spaces. Well, I have a very startling example of why I have a problem with that approach. And I'm looking for my notes right now. Okay. I called up Metro and I said, look, if you guys were going to go out and acquire Forest Park today, what would it cost? And I was going to ask people to guess, but we don't have enough time for that. The response that came back was actually not surprising, but still startling. Even after taking out 25% slopes, or 75% of Forest Park is in 25% slopes, which is definitely a slide hazard area, so development would not occur at a very high density, if at all, in those areas. Forest Park today would cost $309,351,000 to acquire. That would be double the amount that we passed in the 1995 bond measure. There's no way that we can wait to acquire these large blocks of land either within or outside the urban growth boundary. My timer just went off. I think Charles is going to give me another 2 minutes. I've got a list of recommendations. I'm still on cue, I think. I've got another couple of minutes. I actually have 7 recommendations which I would like to throw out to City Club to consider. First is City Club should review its own recommendations which are contained in its park report that was published in 1994. This is a very comprehensive, well-researched report, contained numerous recommendations, only one of which has actually come to pass today, the Gobi 1 bond measure. I've had numerous conversations with Jim Zarin and a lot of other folks who are eloquent park advocates. We think we need to go back maybe 100 years, and even though we've got an advisory committee at Metro for the Green Spaces program, it's a technical advisory committee primarily, we need to develop a parks and green spaces advocacy program, commission, whatever you want to call it, in 1998 to start to create a vision for the next 100 years. In my opinion, and I've talked with lots of folks who are concerned about park issues, that view is shared throughout our community, and I would suggest there's a role for City Club. Secondly, City Club should charge a research committee to more specifically pursue the integration of parks and green spaces into the urban fabric. I've read through another excellent City Club report regarding planning for growth management in the Portland metropolitan region. Parks and green spaces play little or no role in that report. We cannot simply look at urban design and how we can get more units inside the urban growth boundary but better designed without incorporating parks and green spaces as part of that formula. I think, and others share my concern, that we will have lots of citizens who are getting more and more peeved about our growth management strategies in this region if we do not do that. I think the City Club of Portland should support the next Gobi 2 bond measure this fall. We need to provide more funding for Portland Park's natural areas. I've already covered that. While formal City Club support might be problematic now, I would urge that each of you consider going to Portland City Council on August 12th to support, at 2 p.m., to support the new systems development charge that's being proposed for new development. I would suggest there's a role for City Club to look at expanding that to commercial developments as well. And finally, I'll close with Commissioner Sten and Francisconi have pulled together an advisory committee to see how parks and the Portland's Bureau of Environmental Services can cooperate more on realizing what we've all held to be a dream for the Willamette River Greenway. I think with the Willamette being an American Heritage River, with the CSO program, with steelhead listing, we have, I think, an unprecedented opportunity to actually realize the Greenway that many of us have thought we were going to see in this city over the last 20 to 30 years. I've got other points. I'll stop it there and hope we get maybe some provocative questions. We can explore some of these more. Thank you.
See, Betsy, I told you you couldn't do that. No one can hold Mike Houck to 10 minutes. Excuse me as I make some adjustment. The ADA is not alive at the City Club, I can see. So I think that may be the best we can get. Today you will hear from the 3 M's, Marcy, Mike, and me. And I must say that as we take time to talk about one of our treasures, we must not forget that Marcy and Mike are 2 treasures that we value very highly as well. This is very difficult for me. You know, most of you know that I can't really unfold in 10 minutes, and here I am supposed to do cleanup on a subject that's very important. And what enhances the challenge more so is the fact that we're not just talking about Forest Park. This is not just about a park. This is about you and me. It's about them, really about them. It's about the messages that we want to send to those early visionaries that Marcy talked about. It's about the message we want to send to the young people and to their children and their children's children. And we want them to know, we want them all to know that we really were not a selfish and an uncaring people. And more than anything else, this time that I spend with you is about a very important task that sometimes gets overlooked in the hustle and bustle of trying to build a city, and that is to pause and say thank you to a lot of people who've done a lot of good things, and for those who are making good things happen now. We never should get too busy that we don't pause to say thank you. Thanks to many of you here, Portland has one of the premier park systems in the country. And Forest Park contributes a lot to that status. It's a park that is unique in a lot of ways. And believe me, I've seen some. In 1987, 15 of us Americans traveled around this country. We went to every region of the United States. We talked to thousands of people. We saw some of America's greatest treasures, all because the president asked us to go out and see what Americans are doing in the great outdoors. And what do they want to do for the next 35 years? And we went out there, and we saw some treasures beyond belief. But I will tell you, what I can't tell you is that Forest Park is the greatest. But what I can tell you is that you will not find any place in America, an urban park, so close to the heart of the city that provide that wilderness experience 5 minutes from downtown Portland. You will not find that any place in America. So Forest Park is unique. It's priceless. And we need to know what to do in order to ensure that it is always here. I think it should be noted that one of its unique qualities is its unifying quality, the way that it can bring governments together. Here we have Multnomah County, the city of Portland, and our regional governments. They all come to the same table around Forest Parks, and they all have the same agenda, and that is to ensure that we have a legacy worthy of our times. That's important. We don't think enough about legacy and what we want to leave. Our regional network of trails really constitute our crown. All of the special places like Laurelhurst Park, the Rose Gardens, the river, Pioneer Square, all those special places, they make up the jewel. So when you hear someone say the crown jewel of Portland Park System, they mean the big jewel, the one right up front. But the network of trails constitute the crown. Forest Park is unique in that it can qualify as a crown as well as a jewel, because the internal trail network of Forest Park, connected by the Japanese garden, the Rose Garden, the zoo, the Forest Center, the Arboretum, the Rotarian Playground, and the soon to be, with your support, a state-of-the-art children museum. Those constitute the jewels. So forest parks can be qualified, as a crown as well as a jewel. In addition, and it's good to see Keith Hay here. Keith, raise your hand. Forest Park is also potentially the starting point of a world-class greenway, and I mean world-class, from Portland to the Pacific Ocean. From Portland to the Pacific Ocean. It's possible. And there are activities going on right now to ensure that they will have a chance to complete it. We won't complete it, but we'll get it started. They will go as far as they can. Then they will pass it on to their children. From Portland to the Pacific Ocean, all on land that is either in public ownership or willing conservation easements. And not to mention what we will be able to do on the east side. We already go to Boring. There's a small section of land that if we can get an easement across that small section, we have access to the Mount Hood National Forest. And from the Mount Hood National Forest, Canada and Mexico. Portland, we are special. We live in a very special place, and God has blessed us beyond measures. I think that it's important for us to talk about some of our partners. And Marcy mentioned some of those. But we have a very rich history in developing partnerships. Let me just quickly run through some of these. Of course, the county I mentioned, the City Club, the role that you have played, the Oregon Park Foundation, the Committee of 50. Where is Bill? Oh, he was here. One of the members was here. The Committee of 50, and more recently, the Friends of Forest Park, Betsy, and the Trust for Public Land. I don't know whether they're here, but they played a very crucial role in 1989 in jump-starting this major land acquisition. And Nancy, Metro. I take my hat off to Metro. You have done everything you said you would do. With the help of the City Club and a host of citizens, the funds that you gave Metro from 2626, they have exceeded expectation. They have purchased almost 100 acres of land in and around forest parks, and another 265 acres of land. This is important. This is so critical. Just in keeping hope alive. It's so easy to get discouraged during these times when there's so much competition, as Mike said, for that pie. And everybody's trying to get their little slice. And sometimes we feel that the things that we are trying to do, there's no response. But pass on our appreciation to Metro Board and their staff for the outstanding job that they are doing. The Society for Marketing Professionals and PGE, who is helping us to gain a much-needed new access to the park off of the St. Helen Highway. And with, again, your support, we will have that much-needed access. The Oregon Youth Conservation Corps and the many, many young people must be applauded. There is no way that we can pay them for all of the wonderful things that they are doing to protect our natural resources. And publicly, I'd have to say to my natural resources staff, Fred, please stand. Sandy, please stand. Steve is not here, but Those two, under the leadership of Jim Chalin. Jim, please stand. I mean, you know, and I want to say while you're standing, something that I want to paraphrase something Winston Churchill once said about the Royal Canadian Air Force. Citizens of Portland, I will tell you that never in the course of history have so many owed so much to so few. Thank you very much. It is, and I can assure you, as their director, it is not a job for them. It is a calling. Very, very much so. And Sandy, if I didn't have a Sandy, I would have to invent a Sandy. This young lady works under very, very difficult condition. She not only raises money for the ivy removal program, and I'm ashamed to say this, but I gotta say it because this is my decade of candor. She even raises half of her salary. Now that's not right. That's not right. And I do have another chance at budget time, and I'm standing before the City Club right now. That's not right. And if I'm going to be, and all of us are imploring you to go the extra mile, then I've got to go the extra mile. Sandy, thank you so very much. And believe me, I will do better. And the many, many wonderful volunteers. She has a whole cadre of volunteers, and I can't even mention them all. I had to write them down. She's got the Friendly House. That's the Oregon Community Conservation Corps. She's got the counter. She has Fred Meyer, Brown and Ferris, Portland Garden Club, Jacobson Foundation, Metro, Legacy Health, ESCO, Rose Tucker Charitable Trust. She does all of this to raise money to remove ivy from Forest Park. She goes out and raises money to hire people to do that. 5,500 volunteers. And you think I'm going to lose someone like that? No way. I'll cut the other salaries to save that. You don't find a Sandy. Sandy, thank you very much for the job well done. Okay. All right. Let me close by the table is not full yet. You know, there's still room for all of us. And I know, is Kathy here? Where's Kathy? Kathy, oh, Kathy, there she is. Raise your hand. There's going to be a celebration, a birthday. And I don't know, Randy, whether you remember on your 50th birthday what you got for a present, but if you didn't get what you wanted, you know what you wanted. What are we going to give Forest Park for its 50th birthday? I have a suggestion. If you have not heard from Betsy or Kathy, I have, and they have called me to follow up. They sent me a letter asking me to become a corporate partner. And if you haven't received one, you should receive one. Go back and do like I've done, look under all the papers where you stuck it, and pull it out again. I think it would be a nice birthday present, Kathy, if we could all just join up and become corporate partners. So I'm going to encourage all of you to think about that. Let that be the gift to Forest Park on its 50th birthday. That's on the 26th, September the 26th. Okay, well, now you know who she is. See her or see Betsy Wright, and let's if you haven't received a copy of that letter, we need to get them copies together because I think you're going to have a host of people signing up for that. In closing, I want to thank you, City Club. You have always been there. So good to look out and see Charlie Davis after so long, and Kim McCall, whom I don't see, Randy, whom I haven't seen in so long, and Don Sterling. You've always been there. And you've always understood that in order for Forest Park to be all that it can be, our neighborhood parks must be all that they ought to be. And you have been very responsive in that regards. You've made sure that we didn't just take care of the crown jewels, but we took care of those small places where the kid first learned about ecosystem. Because without those, Forest Parks will not be what it is today. Again, thank you very much, and look forward to a long, long working relationship with you.
I think today we can definitely experience the sparkle and the joy that our three panelists have brought. Thank you so much. I too want to kind of get out there and hike those 40 miles again. My question relates to growth management issues and how do we educate our voters about the neighborhood issues, the codes, everything, and how we raise money.
You want to take this one first? You got the growth. Excuse me.
Well, I think my response would be we have a tremendous program in place and we're moving in the right direction with Region 2040, growth management for this metropolitan region. We need to do more to reach across the river. I see John Mignano over here, former Clark County Commissioner, who was involved in developing those early plans. Robert Liberty's in the audience. I'm sure he might want to hold forth as well. But I think what we've developed through the future vision process, through the regional urban growth goals and objectives, the growth concept itself, and the framework plan is, in fact, an opportunity to do exactly what we've been talking about today, and that is to integrate what I've been referring to as the urban green infrastructure. That's parks at the neighborhood level, up to parks like Forest Park, in with higher density mixed-use developments, with pedestrian-friendly neighborhoods, with alternative transit modes, which will make this region a livable place for us in the year 2040, 2050, and beyond. And we've got those policies in place. The question is, do we have the political will, and can we build the support of the public to support those plans? And I would submit to you that what we're discussing today, the legacy of Forest Park and future forest parks, is one of the most critical elements of bringing the public along with the land use and transportation planners and the rest of us in this room who support compact urban form to protect farm and forest land outside the UGB. What we need to do is focus more attention inside the urban growth boundary regarding quality of life issues, which includes parks. Generic response, but I think we have the tools available.
You know how to raise the money?
And the microphone for questions is right over here on the right. We've moved it, so I think that there's been some trouble finding it. But Mike, you've been made reference to an issue that I wanted to ask if you could elaborate on, and that was the difficulty of finding operating funds for the park system or for the Green Spaces program. Could you expand on what our options are, you think, or is that a question that we have to just begin working on to answer?
Well, I would defer to other folks in this room. Greater minds than I have puzzled over that question. I frankly would love to see some of our highway-related, automobile-related funds, gas tax or other impact fees that are associated with the transportation system, which are having such a huge impact on water quality, on stormwater flows, whether it's a drip tax or whatever you want to call it. I personally would favor that kind of approach. There are other avenues out there I know that are available. I'm personally not excited about using lottery funds as is being proposed for parks and salmon, but to be quite frank, we have to take those opportunities that are available to us. So I think there are some other folks here who might have some ideas to share with us on that.
I think one of the things that we need to take a look at is that there are federal funds. There are federal funds that we're entitled to that we're not getting. The Land, Water, and Conservation Fund, those are dollars that came from offshore drilling rights. And the original agreement was that they would use those dollars to replace a lost resource. They were going to go to cities, state, and federal to replace lost resources. Now they're taking those dollars and they're using them for the deficit. And they're not sending any money to the states or urban areas. They are giving funds to national parks. But we stand by and we allow them to use those dollars for other things. If we are really serious, this time we were just about 10 votes short, we could have had another $500,000 coming into Oregon, but we lost on the last vote. We need to let our representatives know that we just want that promise kept. The promise was we would get the dollars. And so that's a source we can't overlook. The other, of course, is I like the idea of Earth Share. You're familiar with Earth Share, where corporations give their employees an opportunity to select natural areas as one of the recipients of their contributions. I like that a lot. I would like to see us have some sort of Earth Share here. where we go to the corporations, we go to the large employers, and we give our employees that opportunity to check off natural resources in this region and as one of the areas where they would like to see their funds go. We are doing this nationally, and we're receiving close to $500,000 a year. And this is for a national organization, so it can be done locally. But short of that, we keep coming back to you every 4 to 5 years with bond measures, as we will do this November, asking you to give us some assistance so that we can continue to at least make some improvements to the system. I don't know of any quick and easy way, but this is one that does stand out.
Paddy Tillett, City Club member. A lot has been talked about the connectivity between green spaces in the urban environment. Something that I come across a lot and have difficulty in sorting out is the distinction between connectivity for as habitat and connectivity for people to walk from A to B. It seems that we have some conflicting state law. There's Title III abjures us to have lots of buffer areas, which is clearly for habitat, and Title VI abjures us to have lots of pedestrian access. Now, it seems that they can't necessarily coexist, that the best habitat is often that which is not accessible. What's a way to resolve this?
Well, first of all, Title III specifically addresses water quality and floodplain management issues. We haven't gotten to habitat yet. We'll get there, Patty, and we'll add some more lands, I hope, through the next process. There will be those conflicts. In general, I personally believe that it's possible, and Metro in fact has recognized this in its planning process. It took all streams and wetlands, all steep slopes, and all floodplains out of the buildable lands inventory, did the calculations for our acreage need for housing and other development, urban development needs, and determined that we in fact did not need to move the urban growth boundary, at least at this point in time, to achieve protection of those areas and meet all of our development needs. Now, there is no question that in areas like town centers, station area planning, and so forth, there will be conflicts that come up. But in general, across the landscape, we need to protect those stream corridors. Perhaps we need some special planning efforts in town centers and other areas that are definitely intended to be developed at a higher density to try to accommodate those densities, try to accommodate that urban design, and perhaps protect more areas outside those particular smaller geographic areas. I don't know if that responds to your question or not. We're not going to get away from conflicts in this process, for sure. We're going to have to be very creative about how we implement Title III and more fish and wildlife habitat protection. And I can tell you, the reason that I got interested in green spaces in 1988 was that I watched how Goal 5, fish and wildlife habitat protection, was being implemented at the local level between 1982 and 88, and we were not getting protection. We have 213 miles of water quality polluted streams. We have 400 miles of streams in this region which we've lost underground. We've not been doing the job that we need to do to protect those resources inside the urban growth boundary.
Chris Smith, club member. I'm also a board member of the Northwest District Association, which is the neighborhood association for Northwest Portland. And our neighborhood can attest to the growing popularity of Forest Park because we host the most popular trailhead for entering the park, and I think there's a residential neighborhood that's rapidly being overwhelmed with the popularity of the park. Commissioner Jordan touched briefly on the efforts for a new trailhead. Could the panel expand on that initiative and what we could do to help support that and make the park accessible to even more users?
Well, what you can do, and you ask, so I'll have to answer, we will have a bond measure on in November, and that, in order to make that happen, we will need to get that approved. So that's something quick and dirty that can be done. Jim, is there anything else you want to add to that? All right.
Well, I think my response would be that we need additional, and I live in Northwest Portland. I'm fortunate I live a 10-minute walk from Forest Park, and I see what goes on up at the top of Northwest Thurman, and we definitely do need new access points. However, I think or more importantly, we need to disperse the use of green spaces and natural areas throughout the Portland, Vancouver metropolitan region. We need to get away from a situation where everybody automatically thinks they've got to go to Sauvie Island or Forest Park, and that if we do our job right and we have this regional interconnected trail system connecting these areas up, then we can have more dispersed use as the population grows. I think is an important element of the green spaces philosophy.
Meg McGill, City Club member and friend of Forest Park. I agree that Forest Park is indeed a treasure, and I've spent many hours there. I would like an update on water quality for the Forest Park, especially Balch Creek.
Anyone know that? You know that, Mike?
Well, I should be able to respond to that, but I'm embarrassed to say I can't. I believe Balch Creek is on the 303D list, the water quality limited stream list. If not, we do know for sure that the native cutthroat trout in Balch Creek, and it's amazing to me that in Fannel Creek, Balch Creek, in Miller Creek, I think there are steelhead, and various other urban streams, we still have native cutthroat and steelhead and salmon using those streams that, due to sedimentation and various other impacts, Balch Creek is in bad shape. And I know that the Bureau of Environmental Services, City of Portland, has a very aggressive program looking at Balch and some of these other urban waterways. It's specific water quality parameters I couldn't respond.
We have time for one more question.
Jim Zarin, City Club member. I'm interested in the panelists commenting on Mike Houck's idea of the need for an advocacy group, sort of region-wide. In my view on this is that there's a lot of groups and organizations and citizens that have an interest in pieces of this puzzle, but that in many and there's a lot of organizations that they're advocating sometimes on this issue, but there seems to be a lack of an organization that's always there, kind of the watchdog group on parks, open space, public spaces, et cetera. And I'm just wondering, I think that there could be a commission, there could be a nonprofit. I think the City Club report recommended something like that. Nothing's happened. I'm curious what the other two panelists think about that.
Well, I think it's kind of interesting how Mike brought up that Olmsted report from 1903, and I really suggest all of you take a look at it. It's beautifully written, and as I say, the vision they had is still very appropriate for today. And so I guess I would take the idea, maybe we need to look at the big picture, as you say, and have a vision for the whole, and get that vision out to people so they can, of course, work to protect their own special park, but also see how that fits into all the pieces. And that's what I think Olmsted tried to do back then. And of course, as Portland grows, the needs, it expands out further and further, but they laid such a good framework that I think if we could find these different groups that may have, who knows if they could all work together, but they could rise above it and look at the whole picture and maybe put aside the little turfs or whatever, and then we could go forward and keep that vision of 100 years from now, maybe before us, as kind of our North Star.
And quickly, Mike convinced me a very long time ago, and it's very little that we can really do locally now. We've got to think regionally, and we've got to look at Vancouver. You're absolutely right, because everything is connected. So I am on board.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, panelists. Marcy,
Nice meeting you.
thank you also to County Forest Park for sponsoring this today with us, and to the ivy removal crew. We're adjourned.
As always. Hey, would you? You're excellent. Good. Marcy, as always. Want to do it again.
I respond to your question.